Shalom. Thank you for joining us. I'm Audrey Levine, the Hadassah Southern California Leadership Vice President, and I'm here with Ori Hammond, a lone soldier serving in the Israeli Army, the IDF. In the early morning of February 6, 2020, Ori was part of a group of Golani soldiers on an overnight heritage trip in Jerusalem ahead of their swearing-in ceremony at the Kotel, the Western Wall. Instead, Ori was seriously injured when that group of soldiers was struck by a car-ramming terrorist attack. 11 of his fellow soldiers suffered mild injuries in the attack. Ori was rushed to Hadassah Hospital, and Ori's father, who had flown to Israel from San Diego to surprise him at that swearing-in ceremony, instead found himself rushing to Hadassah Hospital to be at Ori's bedside. Ori, thank you so much for being here, and why don't you begin by telling us a little about yourself?
All right, well, my name is Ori. I'm almost 19 years old. I grew up in San Diego, California. Both my parents were born in Israel. I have two siblings, Yuval and Agam. My parents, Chagit and Kobe. I went to the San Diego Jewish Academy, attended there from 9th through 12th grade. Previous to that, I went to the Chabad Hebrew Academy. And previous to that, I actually lived in Israel for 2 years. And then previous to that, I was at another Jewish private school.
What inspired you to want to serve as a lone soldier in the IDF?
So what inspired me truly is, well, it's not just inspiration. It was just also something that it made me feel complete. So, it's like a goal in life for on one side. Another side is many things. Like I could name you at least 3 things. For example, one is like, because I was in the Israeli Scouts in San Diego, it made me feel very connected to Israel. We always spoke Hebrew, so that was one reason. Another reason is because both my parents served in the military, and all my family served in the military that live in Israel right now. And third reason is because I just feel I think it's just something that I should be doing. I always attended Jewish schools, and Judaism was a big part of it. And then I remember in 11th grade, I started learning more about Zionism and how Israel was established, and it brought something up in me, and I was like, wow, this is very cool. It's very interesting, and here I am. This is it. I know what I want to do.
Tell me about the process of becoming an IDF soldier.
I went through several seminars in 12th grade, roughly 4 seminars, which explained a bit about how the military works, how it's like living in Israel, dealing with politics in Israel, and all those kinds of things, and truly dipping you into the Israeli water and saying, here, have a taste. And so eventually it was for people to try out these seminars. You could sign up and all of that, but it wasn't a guarantee that you were going to go and move to Israel. Now, once we landed in Israel, the process began, the true process, meaning enlisting actually and having the army notice that you are a contender or someone that is drafting in this coming up draft, I guess you could say. And we went through tests, physical tests, mental tests. Some people were invited to specific, they had specific invitations for Air Force, for example. I received an Air Force invitation, some others as well. And all these sorts of tests that will eventually evaluate your skills based on your knowledge and how you act as a person and in your interviews and whatever. And based on those scores, you can not apply, but you could ask for a specific job. Now, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed that job. However, then if I ask for job A in my top list, if I make a list out of 5 and put job A as my number 1, if I put job B as my number 5, then the likeliness of me getting job A might be higher.
How did you decide that you wanted to draft into the Golani Brigade?
Well, I'll be honest. At first, I wanted to draft to the 669 unit, which is a search and rescue unit, but an elite search and rescue unit. And so there's a day specifically dedicated for those elite units, which is called Yom Sayarot. And in that day, they make you do all kinds of running and carrying sandbags and all of that. And I mean, unfortunately for me, I did not pass. However, another opportunity came for another day for the paratroopers, and I did not pass that as well. And my head was still up. I still wanted to draft to combat, and I said, well, Golani it is. I mean, there There was no reason behind it, but I just said whatever goes.
Tell us a little bit about the Golani Brigade.
So the Golani Brigade was established on February 22nd of 1948. It is Chativa Achat known in Hebrew because it was the first brigade, I guess you could call, that was physically established. And Golani itself isn't known as well as paratroopers for, but it does have a lot of lone soldiers that draft to it. I can tell you for a fact that within my unit itself, I was in Unit 12. Within that unit, I had at least 3 people that I knew beforehand in my unit. At least 3. And then you meet lone soldiers that speak English or other languages like Spanish or Portuguese, and it's very interesting. But in general, Golani is a very well unit known in Israel.
Tell me about when you first arrived in Israel.
All right, so I drafted actually on the 1st of December 2019, and that was my first day in the military. I remember waking up, going to the place where like they pick up the new soldiers, the fresh soldiers. You know, you sign up. They go, "Are you this and this?" Yes, that's me. Let's go. You get on this bus, and then they take you to the main center where everyone goes, and you get your uniform, and you get these papers, you get these vaccinations, and everything, and all of that. Eventually, Golani has 4 months of basic training, and an additional 4 months after that, you have advanced training. So in total, you have 8 months of training itself, and then once you finish those 8 months, you have a week that sums up everything, which is called Shvua Milchama. It's supposed to like depict a war in a way. And then after that, you have a day roughly, it starts at night but ends in the morning, where you walk roughly 50 kilometers with weights and your weapon and everyone together in silence all the way. And at the end, you have a ceremony and you receive your brown beret, which is like Golani. The reason they have a brown beret is because of the ground, and we're so connected to the ground, and our roots. And you receive a pin as well that certifies you as a combat soldier if you pass all the required steps for it.
Tell us about the events of February 6th, 2020.
So I drafted, like I said, on the 1st of December 2019. And I didn't know if I was going to go to the 12th unit, 1351, or Sayeret, which is the elite unit. And eventually they put me in 12. So you begin training and you get to know these new people, these new friends, and the military, you click to people like that. At first you're like, I hate this guy, I don't like him. And then after a week or two, you're like, I still don't like him, but I like him. It's like it's like a love-hate relationship in a way. I was in charge of 3 other people within my squad. So I was a mefaked chulia, it's called. I was like a commander of 3 other people, but then eventually replaced to be like my drill sergeant's sidekick in a way. Like I'm like by him, like during wars or anything, I'm right by him next to my drill sergeant. And so eventually, a month into training, you learn how to do all these things and whatever with your squad and with yourself. And then another month into training, and you learn how to do all these things. They wake you up in the middle of the night, get on your vest. Oh, we have to go out for like a run or something like that, or like get on your vest, and we're going out for like a 5 kilometer like walk or whatever, with like stretchers and weights and all of that. And eventually we get to the 5th of February. This was the morning of February, and they're like, okay guys, we're going to Jerusalem tonight. And it was going to be like from the 5th at night till the 6th in like very early in the morning when it was sunrise. So like religious people could pray at the Western Wall and all of that. And yeah, so eventually we leave to Jerusalem and we arrive. And so once we arrive, it was sort of this like educational day where we were supposed to learn about Golani and like the connection it has to Jerusalem and about the 6-Day War and about all these kinds of operations that it dealt with. We get to a specific location in Jerusalem called the Mitcham Tachana. Now it's like a train station, bus station area. And eventually we're waiting on the sidewalk. Now imagine there's a roundabout, and to the left of it, there's a sidewalk. Now we're standing on the sidewalk, everything's okay, and now a vehicle comes out of nowhere and does one full round loop around the sidewalk. The roundabout. And it does it one again around the roundabout, and eventually, instead of finishing it, he drives towards the sidewalk. Now, I was fully covered with jackets, a beanie, neck cover. It was cold. It was very cold in Jerusalem at the time. It was February, very cold. And eventually, everyone's like screaming, like move, move, like get out of the way, whatever. And then eventually I raise my head, and boom, car comes out of nowhere, hits me, and like I remember everything. I remember it physically running me over. Now I don't even know how to describe the feeling because I don't even remember the pain. Like it was to that point where my body's adrenaline was rushing so much that I don't even remember the pain of the car physically running me over. But I do remember the noises and everything. Now, after it ran me over, I somehow, with the adrenaline rush that I had, got up on my feet and I started screaming. I was like, what just happened? I can't believe it. The car ran me over. I'm in shock. And eventually, like, a minute later, I fall on to my knees and, like, the adrenaline's over. It's like, oh, we're done. Like, you're on your own now. And I fall and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And then I realize after a second, like, I'm bleeding from my face and everything. And, like, my jaw's not in place. I'm trying to bite and I'm not able to. It was like weird. It's like, I don't know what's going on. 3 minutes later, a medic from Magav, which is a border patrol, Mishmar Gvul, came. She was in like the area, and so she arrived, and so she saw me, and she like went towards me because I was the closest one to her, I'm assuming. And she came to me and she was talking to me, and like I realized she had a bit of an accent, so I was like, "Hey, are you a lone soldier?" Like, I was keeping it cool while I was like still on the ground, injured, whatever. I was like, wait, are you a lone soldier? And then she's like, yeah, I am. Like, she had like a British accent. She's like, where are you from? I was like, oh, I'm from California. What about you? She's like, oh, I'm from England. And I was like, oh, it's so nice. And I'm still like, on the ground. Eventually, an ambulance arrives and they put me into the ambulance. I remember like they had a stretcher, like put it under my back, or they put like this thing under my back to flip me over to the stretcher, put me into the ambulance, and then they hooked me up with IVs for morphine to relax the pain. And thank God they had that because I was in pain. I was in pain. And so eventually they cut my clothes to see if there's any open wounds or anything else that they're missing that they can't physically see. And we get to the hospital. We get to the hospital and the social worker asks me, "We need to call your mom. What's her phone number?" I was like, "She doesn't live in Israel." And then she's like, "Well, what about your father?" And I was like, "Neither does he." And she's like, "Okay, who do we call?" I didn't say Ghostbusters. I said my grandpa. And so eventually we called my grandpa, and I was like, look, Saba, Chief, I'm in the hospital. I was like, listen, I'm in the hospital. I need you to call Ima right now and tell her I'm in the hospital in Jerusalem. I was injured. Tell her right now. And eventually he calls her, and my mom, from what he explained to me, my mom was like, why are you awake so late at night? He's like, no, all he called me, listen, you have to go, or you have to call the social worker. Here's her phone number. Eventually, she calls her and she gives me the phone. She goes, look, your dad's in Israel. We want to surprise you. He's on his way, blah, blah, blah. And, because of the morphine, I was like too relaxed, So I was like, okay. And eventually, after that phone call, they're like, okay, we're going to do a CT scan on you. Now, when they did the CT scan, I remember there's like a photo of me and like my body was like it was like this. And so they did the scan and they were like, look, you broke 3 ribs, you broke your hips, you broke your jaw, you broke your nose, and you broke a bone over your eye, roughly here. And luckily for you, you'll only need a jaw surgery. Now, I'm telling you, whoever's watching, do not get a jaw surgery. It's the worst pain ever. Now, so eventually that's what they told me. And I was like, okay, thank God, like, my legs are fine, my hands are fine, like, thank God. And so eventually they take me back to the ER, like to the emergency room, whatever, and I'm in the bed, I can barely move, I'm in pain, I have 2 IVs in, and eventually like all these officers from the military started showing up, and I'm like, what is going on? Like this officer, and then the guy who's in charge of my base, and the officer who's in charge of like that like class of November 2019, and all of these people just show up. And eventually my grandpa shows up with his neighbor, and my dad shows up and he's like, oh my God, thank God, he sees me, he's like super happy. It was incredible, like people who I didn't expect to see in the hospital, I saw. And like people that I've never even met visited me. Like a lot of people that like are like well known in Israel visited me. singers, all kinds of people, the prime minister, other political figures. It was great. You know, it was like a lot. It showed like people cared. Several days later, I like a famous singer named Dana Mehdi visited me, and it was great. It was fantastic, actually. That Sunday, I think I had a jaw surgery, and honestly, like my jaw's perfectly fine now. Thank God. Like the doctor knew what he was doing. His name is Doctor Zevi. Great doctor. He's really nice too. Um, and so he did an amazing job. I mean, the only thing that was a bummer is that I couldn't eat, but like, you know, I couldn't do anything about that because like I had to get my jaw back into place. If it weren't for the surgery, then my jaw wouldn't be nice now, you know, like back to normal, I guess. Um, so everything that I ate was basically or like blended or was a smoothie, like an actual smoothie, not like a chicken blended and you call that a smoothie. Like I'm talking about fruits, juices, etc. And so not just the jaw was my only difficulty. It was also like physical therapy, I guess you could say, because remember I broke 3 ribs and my hips, which you know it's like starting scratch. Like every time I sneezed, it was incredible amounts of pain. Like it would be like imagine like you know when you breathe in, you know you're like your rib cage like you know like inflates and whatever. I don't know how the anatomy of it works, but it would just hurt. Now the thing about my hips is that like walking was something like I struggled with. In the beginning, I remember the first day I couldn't get out of bed. Second day I couldn't get out of bed. Third day I said I'm getting out of bed. I took one step and I was like, get me crutches, get me something. I can't. You know, it was painful. And so eventually like I dealt with that pain. Like for one day I was on crutches and then I was like, no, I'm walking as slow as I want to. I'm walking. Like, I don't care. So I walked and I walked and I walked. And it took time. You know, I did my physical therapy, hydrotherapy, all kinds of things. And you know, after a month and a half, you know, like I was released from the hospital, and eventually after a couple of days, I moved in to a place in Ra'anana called Abay Benji, which there I stayed because I did physical therapy in the area. It's like a 20-minute drive, and I go every other day to do physical therapy, and you know, I do the drills at home. You know, I had like the Abay Benji was a lone soldier house, if I didn't mention, for combat soldiers specifically. However, um, because it was a special scenario, I was able to stay there for a month. Um, and so I did physical therapy and all kinds of things. Now I still had pain in my left leg. I was limping because my hip broke on this side. And you know I was limping a bit, but eventually you know you get through it. Um, and yeah, and then end of April, I remember I get a phone call. They're like mid-April even. I was like, they're like, hey, we were told that you want to get back into the army, like, and because of Corona, they couldn't physically check me. They have to do it over phone. So like, okay, look, are your ribs fine? Like, is everything fine? I was like, yeah, no problem. And like, seriously, like everything was like, it was like freshly back to normal. It wasn't like right now where I'm good. You know, it was like freshly back to normal. If I really want to, I can like if I really want to, I can walk. You know, like everything's fine. But if I do anything extreme, then I'll feel the pain, obviously. Um, and so they're like, hey, like you don't have any pain. That's perfectly fine, and you'll be able to go back to the military next week, which is great news for me. I was super happy. I was stoked. You know, and next week showed up and I'm back in uniform, driving to a new base, never been to, but I knew that I was going there. I knew that I was enlisting in a new desk job, and that was fine with me because like it would take time until I get back to what I am or to like a better physical state, I guess you could say. And now I'm still at that job. It's really interesting. There's great people on that base.
Now that some time has passed, tell us how you are doing.
Thank God. First of all, you know, I'm smiling like normally. You know, my jaw's back in place. That's one. Ribs are fine. Hips are great. Now, the thing that I had trouble with was, you know, getting back into like actually walking. You know, those types of things. So like, it was hard because like you know I was in great shape, and then all of a sudden, boom, like something stopped you. Like it's like okay, now you can't work out for like the next 3 months, and then you have to start again and again and again. So like it took time, and you know I'm still getting up to like where I was before, but we're doing great. You know, I'm still smiling. You know, that's all that matters.
Tell me a little more about your treatment at Hadassah Hospital.
Oh yeah, I mean Hadassah was great. It was fantastic. I remember once I got my my jaw surgery when they removed the metals Place I went to was this pasta place at Hadassah. Fantastic pasta. Wow, it was amazing. It was like, imagine like being reborn and like being able to eat after a month of no chewing, physical chewing. It's fantastic. But overall, it was great treatment. I mean, it's like right on top of like a mountain, beautiful view. I had a really nice view actually, and it was fantastic. The people were like very caring. You know, it they did their job, and like it made me feel like I was like in a very like supported environment.
Ori, thank you so much for sharing your journey and experience with us. We are thrilled that you have recovered well and that Hadassah played an integral role in your recovery. On behalf of Hadassah and everyone watching this video, we thank you for your service in protecting our beloved Israel. Lech l'shalom, go towards peace, and toda rabbah. Thank you very, very much.